quality of a Fire Emblem map can be separated into 5 different factors. Flavor, how well the map matches the story and atmosphere that it is trying to portray, and whether or not it succeeds at making you feel like you're really experiencing the story as the developers intended. Objective, what the map is asking you to do in order to finish the chapter, be it seizing, routing, escaping, or defending. Is it offering you an objective that is interesting to work towards? Replayability, you finished the chapter, now how do you feel about it? Frustrated? Relieved? Satisfied? There's any number of possible outcomes that can occur after finishing a chapter, so consider whether or not you'd enjoy playing the chapter again on a subsequent playthrough. Difficulty. Difficulty might not be an important factor for everyone, but a fair amount of players yearn to be challenged by Fire Emblem, to be given a puzzle to solve with the resources provided. Was the map that you just finished difficult in a compelling way? Enjoyability. Plain and simple, is the map fun to play? Are you having a good time whilst playing it, and if so, are you able to articulate exactly why the map is so stimulating? When all of these variables are managed effectively, what you're left with is an incredibly satisfying chapter to play through, providing a memorable experience for the player that they'll hopefully be excited to enjoy again during a second playthrough. And if you don't pay attention to this formula, what you're given is some of the worst the series has to offer. My name's Blute. Welcome to F.O.R.D.E. And welcome back to another episode of F.O.R.D.E. This time, tackling a Shadow Dragon map. Did you manage to solve the incredibly difficult anagram last time? Anagrams are dorky. I'm not going to pretend they're not a little bit like, punch out my specs and solve this anagram. I must, report to the book club. I solved the anagram. I'm Weevil Underwood for some reason. I think Weevil Underwood's voice actor died recently. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Anyway, yeah. If you manage to solve the anagram, you are a true Fire Emblem gamer, and I respect you in many different ways. But the anagram was Acing Mafiosos, which translates into an Oasis of Magic, a chapter I am actually rather fond of. Now, I don't think this is a perfect map. I don't think it's an amazing map, to be completely honest. But it's a map I'm rather fond of in the grand scheme of things for a variety of different reasons, and we'll get into those in a sec, but I think we can just go ahead and move right into our criteria. So, starting with F, flavor. This map is firing on all cylinders with flavor. I've been talking about how replayability is probably the most difficult category to, fulfill. I'd say flavor is probably the easiest category to fill, because we're 3 for 3 so far. But out of the 3 chapters we've reviewed so far, I'd say Oasis of Magic probably succeeds on flavor the hardest. And I think the main reason I think the chapter just integrates story and gameplay so effectively, it makes me feel like I'm properly in Arcanea wandering through 20 million different chapters so I can see it's a different throne every map. But I think for the reason that this chapter succeeds in flavor, where a lot of other Arcanea chapters really don't, is the use of Garneth. I'm really fond of Garneth as a villain. I really, really like him. I don't think he's particularly deep. He's basically just a guy who got told no once and decided to become a supervillain, which I can completely respect. I've done that many a time. I think without Garneth, the chapter would be a pretty bland, run-of-the-mill rush to the exit style chapter that most of the Shadow Dragon chapters feel like. But due to the way that Garneth is utilized in this map, I actually think it stands out from a lot of the other maps in the series, and a lot of the other desert maps in the series. We'll get into the map's, identity as a desert chapter later on. It's crazy that we're talking about a fucking desert chapter so early on. I just kind of felt like talking about this chapter. I replayed through Shadow Dragon recently, and I'm like, hey, this chapter wasn't too bad. I want to talk about it. Let's just talk about how Garneth is utilized effectively. Garneth will make his first physical appearance on this map, acting effectively as a wall for your units. Garneth is the biggest obstacle on this map from both a flavor and a gameplay perspective, so to say. This will be the first time that you've physically encountered him, and even just by taking a quick glance at his stats, you will immediately know that he is not to be trifled with. He has had many a foreshadowing up to this point. You've been told many times that Garneth is a big deal, and he is very, very threatening. He's basically the main villain. Like, Medius is the big bad evil guy. He's the, grrr, I'm a dragon. I'm a big inflatable, Macy's Day Parade dragon floating around, and you need to throw a child at me twice to kill me. Whereas Garneth is like the actual villain, and this applies to both New Mystery and Shadow Dragon. He's the guy pulling the strings. He is the puppet master, puppeteering Hardin and New Mystery. And, not really puppeteering Medius in Shadow Dragon, but he's the one, doing everything. He's the one who takes Falchion. He's the one that, brainwashes Tiki. He's the one behind the scenes. He's the real deal. So by having all of this foreshadowing for Garneth, many villagers being like, ooh, don't face Garneth. You have that fucking village in FE1 that says you can't defeat Garneth, which is actually completely accurate. By having Garneth make his first proper, like, physical debut in the story, paired with, like, really great artwork, I want to say, like, the CG that you receive upon, like, entering the chapter is actually really high quality. I really like Shadow Dragon's art, for the most part. I actually really appreciate just the style. It's very unique. And, more importantly, a genuinely sinister theme. Like, I remember Garneth's theme. Shadow Dragon has pretty, like, kind of simplistic music, but I like it for the most part. Garneth has a really, like, eerie theme. It creates an almost, like, just not suffocating atmosphere, but it feels like there's just a darkness encroaching. It really emphasizes Garneth's just malefic power, so to say. And by creating this really eerie and oppressive atmosphere in the preamble to the chapter, it kind of does a really good job about telling you how Khadeen has almost been, like, corrupted by Garneth. Like, the intro text tells you about how it was this once thriving mech, home to studious mages who just wanted to learn and expand their knowledge, and, like, we will improve the world with our grand, like, oasis of knowledge, so to say. But by the time you get there, it feels like this ideal utopia has just been completely wiped off the face of the map. Like, there's nothing there. It's basically just ruins at this point. And Garneth is operating out of said ruins with the few students left who have basically just remained loyal to him, or maybe he's brainwashing them or something. Are they evil? Who knows? This is Garneth's base. Like, this isn't Khadeen, City of the Mages. This is Khadeen, like, Garneth's hideout, basically. It's just oozing with atmosphere. I fucking love it. Also, by having the map be kind of sparse with its units, like, the map does not have that many units, and the reinforcements, while present, aren't particularly, like, heavy. It's like 1 or 2 units a turn. It adds to the idea that there really just isn't anything left of the old Khadeen. Even if it kind of does mess with the difficulty, but we'll get back to that. It feels like a really somber chapter. The way Garneth just shows up is a complete fucking force to be reckoned with. Like, he will obliterate, like, 90% of your army if they fight him, meaning you need to figure out a way to deal with him, which can make it very frightening for the chapter. The enemies are all very frightening, but there is very few of them. And, like, by the time you've finished off the enemies, like, it feels like there's just nothing left but sand and the past, you know? It's just great. And, like, Garneth doesn't even get defeated, he just leaves after turn 6. By the time you get to turn 6, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm done. We'll fight again in, like, 10 chapters. You want Falchion? Come get it. Like, it genuinely does feel like you never stood a chance to begin with. He was absolutely just playing with you. Which obviously is true, since Imholu makes him completely invulnerable. It's executed so well. It's a really, like, almost a tragedy for Khadeen, or Khadine, however you want to pronounce it. It makes you feel powerless to both help or save what's left of Khadeen, because there is nothing left, or defeat Garneth. Like, oh, it's a trope I'm really fond of in media. It's the you're too late. I fucking love it in media when the storyteller is just effectively just telling, like, the person in charge or the player or, like, the point of view protagonist. It's like, you didn't make it in time. You fucked up. Like, you could have come to Khadeen sooner and there might have been something left to save. And the fact there are so few units and that Garneth is just ruling it at this point, it works really well. I love it. It's just, it feels like a sad chapter to play, and I like it. It's an oasis of flavor. I fucking adore this map's flavor. Now, moving on to objective. The objective in Shadow Dragon is Seize, and I can say, like, Shadow Dragon is one of, 3 games in the series where I can just say the objective in Shadow Dragon is to seize, and that is correct. It's not for a specific map, it's just for the entire frickin' game. That's it, you seize. Like I've said before, seizing isn't an inherently bad objective. I can think of a genuine, like, there are a few chapters where seizing is a completely fine objective, and it can feel satisfying to wade through all the reinforcements and dangerous forged weapons and enemy tactics and blah 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 blah. We've gone over that. And here, it kind of just doesn't feel that way. It feels like the bookend to a chapter rather than, like, a satisfying conclusion. I already talked about how, like, Khadeen feels really desolate because there's very few enemies, and by the time you've reached the end of the map, it does just feel like you're just, like, gazing out at the sand in your eyes and wondering, like, what this once great civilization was all about. And while you could absolutely interpret seizing the castle as sort of a bittersweet end to the chapter, it's kind of pushing it, and I'm being very generous with the flavor. Like, I really like this chapter's flavor, and even I think that's pushing it. Now, I will say that the side objectives in this chapter are actually somewhat plentiful, and that you're given a good amount of things to do, instead of just rushing through the enemies and making it to the finish line as quickly as possible. It is not just race to the finish! There is a bunch of side objectives to constantly keep track of. You gotta make sure that Garneth isn't slaughtering your army, for one. You need to make sure that there is someone dealing with him for the first 6 turns. Otherwise, if you just let him reign free, I believe there's 3 turns where you can just walk up to basically any unit that isn't a promoted laner or like a really high level Sheeta and just wipe them off the face of the map. They will just die because he's super fast and Hulu gets really hard. You gotta make sure the forts are covered up to prevent the Draconite reinforcements, because otherwise those are gonna become a problem really quick. Draconites are scary as enemies and you don't want like a billion of them to deal with. You gotta get the chests, those have good stuff in them, which means you need to make it past Garneth and deal with the mage reinforcements. You gotta deal with the Swarm Bishop boss. Like there's a good amount of things to do in a meaningful way. It feels like there is a good amount of things for your units to like almost to be splitting up in a reasonable way. I like it when Fire Emblem asks me to split up my units in a way that actually feels satisfying and not just arbitrarily detrimental to my army, so to say, because most of the time it is just better to keep your units together in one big death squad. I do actually have, I think I have one main gripe with this map, in that I actually think the deployment limit is too high. Which is a weird complaint. That's a weird complaint for any Fire Emblem map, is saying, like, I have too many characters. Because normally I would think the total opposite. I actually think Shadow Dragon is, for the most part, somewhat restrictive with the amount of units that you're allowed to field, but here you're given 16 units, when in reality, I feel like I only really needed like 10. So it makes almost half of your units feel somewhat pointless, because there just isn't enough to do. There's some stuff to do, but there isn't that much to do. This one is probably the trickiest criteria of the bunch for this one. I think I'm going to be a bit harsher than last time and say it fails in its objective, because the Seas isn't especially interesting, a fair amount of your units really just aren't doing anything in this map, and the treasure behind Garneth, well, like, it's good stuff, so I do feel, like, encouraged and rewarded when I get it. It's never really in any danger, because most Shadow Dragon maps do have thieves that are just programmed to go for the chests and then run away! But here, while they do have the same AI, they're positioned in such a way that they are just very easy to deal with. They have very strange positioning. I actually really think Shadow Dragon's positioning of thieves, for the most part, is really jank, because on half the maps, they're positioned way too close, and on the other half, they're positioned way too far. There are only, like, a couple of maps in the game where I think these were positioned really, really well. This is one of the poor ones. They do nothing in this map, they just die. I think overall, there's just more misses than hits, so I'm gonna give it a fail. It fails on objective in my eyes. In terms of replayability, this is a really strange chapter, because in my head, every time I play through Shadow Dragon, I always think, oh yeah, Oasis of Magic is coming up, that's a good chapter. And then by the time I reach chapter 15, I kind of remember the motions that I'm supposed to go through in order to beat the chapter, and how there isn't really much room for variation. Which is actually one of Shadow Dragon's biggest issues as a whole, now that I really think about it. Because with every Fire Emblem game, you're probably going to try out different units on different runs just to like experience how different units feel. On your first run of a Fire Emblem game, you're going to use the units that you like. And on your second run, you might try out, oh, I'll try out like that unit. Or I'll try out this unit. I didn't use Donald on my first run of Awakening. I'll try him out this time. Like, you want to try out different units because it's nice to have variation in your army. And pretty much every game does this well, for the most part. Even games like Engage, where your early game units are pretty much just strictly worse than your late game ones. That's one of the big scraps, or one of the biggest problems with Engage. But in Shadow Dragon, I feel like your squad of units is almost always going to be the same, because a good half of the characters in Shadow Dragon are just kind of sitting in that big nebulous pool of being either just inferior to the good units, or they're just completely unusable. I like units like Mathis and Roger and Tomas as much as the next guy, but let's just stop lying to ourselves, people. You're gonna be using Sheeta to solo half of the game, because that's just how Shadow Dragon works. And it's especially noticeable on a map like this, since it's a desert map. And it can make for a very samey chapter, which can mostly be blamed on the lack of player unit variety, which could be viewed as a personal thing, but for the most part in Shadow Dragon, you're usually just gonna be using the same pool of units, because Rad and Caesar will see combat over my fucking dead body. As well as with the lack of enemy units, which while it helps the flavor, it can just hinder a lot of the other categories. Because by having a very scarce selection of units, and there's only mages and flyers, it can feel a bit samey, because there's basically just two enemy types that you need to deal with. It's like, okay, flyers will go really far, they might not insta-kill my units, but they are dangerous, and mages can only go so far, but they hit like trucks, but they're very squishy. That's it, there's two types of enemies. Yeah, that's it. I want to be generous and say like, oh, it's a replayability, because I enjoy it when I replay it. But no, it really doesn't. It is mostly just, as I've said, it's mostly just going through the motions chapter, gameplay-wise. Man, we're 3 for 3 on failures with replayability. Will we get one? I can think of a bunch of chapters in my head that have good replayability. At the very least, like, I can think of like two other games off the top of my head. Conquest and Engage, they have chapters that are definitely replayable. Bear with me, people. We'll defeat this category eventually. Now, as for the difficulty, our big old friend in D. I should establish, I played this chapter on Hard 3, because I think it's the most enjoyable difficulty for the game. I think Hard 5 is just kind of obnoxious, and Hard 1 isn't, like, that much harder than normal to the point where it's, like, a really satisfying difficulty. So I think Hard 3 is a nice in-between. But, yeah, the difficulty is kind of weird. Hard 3 can be pretty challenging. I can definitely think of some tough maps in Hard 3, but overall it's not, like, super difficult. It's pretty difficult. Like, the early game can be very tough if you're not experienced. And then the late game can be pretty tough, because enemies will start using forged weapons. But around about the mid-game, I'd say, the game gets a lot... There's like a big lull, where the game just kind of becomes pretty easy, or like kind of obnoxious, because you got to go through the Norda Market and the Wooden Cavalry, like, slog of the game. 11, 12, 13. There's a lot of like mid-game chapters, where it's like, oh man, Shadow Dragon's mid-game is so boring. It's more like irritating than difficult. But yeah, as for the difficulty of this chapter, it's a little weird. It definitely does have some challenge. For starters, every single enemy is either magical or flying, meaning that they effectively have free reign over the terrain completely because it's a desert map. So you do have to take your opponent seriously, which I do appreciate. Moreover, while the mages seem kind of nothing-y at first, this is Shadow Dragon, so resistance basically isn't a stat for anyone who isn't called Lena, meaning that these mages fucking hurt. These bozos are going to do anywhere from like, I want to say 18 to like 22 damage with L-Fire tomes. So units are generally only going to be able to take like one hit before they have to go, I'm out, and they have to go and get healed. Which actually does make for an interesting enemy type, as you will either try to one-shot the mage so it can't counterattack at all, or you'll have to keep constantly tagging out your units. Which, honestly, is an interesting dynamic. I like it. As for the flyers, it's really simple, but since they're not getting hindered by the sand at all, you do have to play carefully around them. You do have to have those enemy ranges on. Because while obviously they're not like insta-kill your units levels of strong, they're like reasonably tanky, and if you don't have an archer or Excalibur around, they can be somewhat difficult to deal with. And God forbid you don't fucking secure those forts in time. Because having to deal with those Draco Knight reinforcements every turn, potentially multiple, can make the map even more troublesome, can make it genuinely really difficult. Finally, back to my good old pal, Garneth. He might seem kind of simple after you finish the chapter, as, yeah, he will just leave after turn 6 and go, whoop, bye, see ya. See ya in Dark Pontifex. While he is just a puzzle to be solved, I actually do really appreciate that he is a puzzle to be solved. He isn't just, like, a non-threat lingering in the distance. I want to say in FE1, he doesn't move at all. Whereas in this, he will move from turn 1, so from turn, like, 3 onwards, he will be a threat. So the fact that he isn't just set decoration, he is actually someone who will go, in 3 turns, I will start fucking firing. This is my gun. It's called Hulu, and it doesn't like when you breathe. It was a puzzle that I needed to figure out the solution to, because it's not just as simple as, oh, I'll stick Sheeta in front of him, she'll survive. Because my Sheeta was just dying in 2 rounds of combat, and I couldn't reasonably keep her topped up, and I needed her to do other things as well. So I needed someone else to tank Garneth, which in my situation was actually to just barrier up Lena or my Ogma, because my Ogma was fucking cracked on this run. He leveled strength, skill, speed, basically every level, which is insane, and send them to block the choke point. Which again, can be a very simple solution, but the fact that the game just bluntly told me to figure out a solution to this puzzle without babying me at all was very much appreciated. Yeah, I think it does succeed on difficulty. It's not the hardest map in the game by a long shot, but the fact that there are a bunch of different things that you need to constantly keep an eye on, they are all reasonably difficult in their own right. It makes for, like, satisfying gameplay. It's a very short chapter, but it's a very sweet chapter. And if you're gonna be a short desert chapter, that's a big fucking thumbs up in my book. And our final category, E! Enjoyability. Yeah, let's just keep it real quick for this one. I don't think the map is insanely deep. I think the flavor is done very well, but I think gameplay-wise it is very simple. I don't think it's the most enjoyable map in Shadow Dragon, but I'm just going to say that, go ahead and, like, be very blunt and say it succeeds on enjoyability, because this is a desert map that doesn't fucking suck. This is a desert map that I actually kind of enjoy playing. For one very simple reason. It actually allows you to move your non-flyer and magic units around at a reasonable pace with the plains terrain. Like, there are just patches of plains around the map that aren't sand, which means your regular units aren't completely hindered. They're only somewhat hindered. It feels much better to move around on. I think that is literally enough for me to give it a pass on enjoyability. Like, the difficulty is nice. The flavor makes it interesting to play. Like, it's nice and short and sweet. It doesn't overstay its welcome. And, like, I know it's kind of bad to compare it to a lot of other maps that aren't even in the game, but this is like a top 3 desert map. Because the devs actually realized that the chapter would be super dull if you're only using 2 unit types. Which with reclassing, you probably totally could. Yeah, I'm really glad they forgot how to do this for the next 15 fucking desert maps. It really took until, like, Engage before we got another good desert map. Someone approved Henri's Way, people. I'll never fucking figure out why. It'll haunt my dreams forever. And that will wrap us up for this week's episode. And I'm gonna go ahead and say that this map is underrated. Maybe not good, maybe not bad. I think it fits into the underrated category. I don't think this map gets the praise it deserves from a flavor and enjoyability standpoint. As far as desert maps go in the series, it's probably like a top 3 map, which is like completely crazy because it's literally the first one. And it's not actually that good of a chapter. Like, it's decent. It's one of the better ones, but like the bar is so like buried in the sand. Like, it's not like a pole vault bar. It's like a fucking limbo bar. It is like reaching the Earth's core. If it goes any deeper, it's gonna appear in China. Either way, I think it's a pretty decent map. It's a map I don't think is amazingly high quality, but I rather enjoy it on subsequent playthroughs. And I think that's good enough for me. Yes, that'll do for this week. As for our anagram, this one's a little bit trickier because the title of the next chapter was shorter than average, so I had to kind of improvise. So I'll give you this one in the form of the answer to a question, which is, what was the name of Zelda's far more memorable alter ego in Wind Waker? To which I will answer with, Tetra. For those in the back, Tetra. Alright, that'll do for this week. I will catch you guys next time. Have a great one, everyone. I will see you next week.